I want to thank you for your participation in my life and participation in collaboration to Latin life. So I haven't forget you, and right now I just want to wish you and to all my friends and even to my enemies a very peaceful and very happy Merry Christmas. Todos mis amigos y a todos los que de alguna manera tal vez no he nombrado, pero que están dentro de mi corazón, en mi recuerdo, y a quienes les estoy muy agradecido. A todos ellos, feliz año nuevo, feliz nuevo siglo, feliz próximo milenio. Y ahora la entrevista con el señor RudiFuchs. Mr. RudiFuchs, thank you very much to accept this interview. Please tell me, you as one of the gods of our cultural world in Holland, what do you think? Yes, because I think you are in a very nice position. What do you think we could, or what could be done to improve this cultural world in Holland?
Well, I think what could be done is to improve on the exchange of things we don't know. I mean, I have always felt that the exciting thing about culture is the discovery of what you don't know. Mm-hmm. There is, however, a commercial idea of culture which promotes to people what they know already. So more Van Gogh, more Van Gogh, more Van Gogh. And I think that museums or music, theaters or journals, whatever, they should try and find out what they don't know yet. And I believe that then by necessity you come to different parts of the world. I mean, Europe there's a lot of things unknown in Europe, but there's still much more unknown in Latin America or in Asia or in Africa. I'm not a specialist on this. I mean, but there are other people. But I believe that what is important is to bring these things from the rest of the world and try to present them as with the same seriousness and the same dignity that we bring to that we have when we present Picasso or some other famous painter. The thing is that for too long these artists from other parts of the world, the so-called third world, are usually shown in small centers or in ethnographical museums as if they were animals or strange people. There is something. I mean, the idea of the cultural dominance of America or certain styles of modern is over. It's done with. I mean, modern art, which has a particular ideological style, in my view, doesn't exist anymore. It's broken down. What we have now is contemporary art all over the world. And if you have an artist in Mali or in India or in Argentina or in Holland or in Norway, they work with particular materials and incentives and techniques, and they work with them all the time. And what comes out of it are this grand mixture of impulses going around the world, carried forward by television, by information channels, by the internet, and eventually and this is contemporary culture. And so when we have an exhibition, if we try to do this next year, when we have an exhibition of a photographer from Mali, we have to bring him with exactly the same form, catalog, opening as if he were a great artist from Germany. The same, and not treat him. This is, not having shows from 25 artists from Brazil. The thing is that television is there, and it is unavoidably a platform of debate, information, discourse in this world, and it should be kept as long as possible. It should be kept. But even in America, it's they have most channels are incredibly commercial. On the other hand, in the same structure, American networks, because they are in competition, they produce the most incredible documentaries about the incredible things, which otherwise we would not know about. So I don't share your misgivings. I think television is fantastic. But it is still not realized. Retired Protestant, and even if I'm not a practical Protestant, I still feel that the morality and the idea of that nothing should be too luxurious, and that things should be frugal, black and white. That still is in my veins. Introduction to a discussion about policy, foreign policy and culture. I would prefer the description foreign policy and art, because culture is something vague. It doesn't mean anything. It's a kind of soup with various flavors, but art is something very specific and precise. So I say foreign policy and art. I want to speak about a particular worrying phenomenon in the 20th century, a form of aesthetic exclusivity, a form even maybe of certain aesthetic censure, which makes certain paintings right and certain paintings wrong. Now this has always been the case in art history. There were always various schools who said that their painting was better than other painting. So I suppose that in the 15th century the Florentines, who painted in a very linear, clear manner, thought that the Venetian form of painting, which was more colorful, more atmospheric, more color, more sfumato, was less defined in its drawing, that the Florentines probably thought that the Venetian painting was not as good as theirs, not as precise as theirs. But I think they never contemplated the idea that it was wrong. Wrong meaning that it should not be done, that kind of painting. And this particular discussion entered the 20th century, and entered the 20th century particularly after the Second World War, which was won by the United States. And what happened was that in the United States, after the war, a description was formulated of what we call modernism. And modernism is everything which we call modern art, which starts with Picasso, Mondrian, and then maybe before Cézanne, and then ends up with contemporary abstract painting. I'll come back to that. But the idea that there was something better and more right, and Amsterdam was wrong, entered the 20th century sometime after 1945. I had written an essay some years ago about this problem, and the essay was an example, a little story about the fate of the German painter Kurt Schwitters. But I thought that in view of the drama of last night's debate and the memory of that debate this morning, I thought that my presentation should be more like a demonstration. The character of Dutch art in general and in particular is it carries the message that Dutch people, and this is checked it out in other fields, mathematics, the only Dutch Nobel Prizes ever given in physical sciences, because Dutch people only believe what they see. And it's a very profound thing. They believe what they see. And if you otherwise think, yesterday we heard Robert Menasse saying something he did not believe. It's very natural for an Austrian, because if you look at Austrian art, you see Jugendstil paintings by Klimt and Schiele, you see all these wonderful hairs and decorations and silver and jewels around the face and all these things, and covered in veils. Salome, the music as well. Then you see that in Austria everything is wrapped in figures of speech, in detours, in masks, in decorations, even the food. The great Wiener Schnitzel is wrapped meat. And so Austrians do not believe what they see, in a certain sense. And Haydn is an exceptional person because he is un-Austrian. He says things exactly as he thinks he should be said. He is European. He is modern. He is something who breaks the mold of Austrian masked, veiled argument, or the language is like that. I believe it is very important that we try and somehow organize, from the point of view of foreign policy and art, that the politicians actually make possible that every minority point of view in art is visible in the world, and that there are not these kind of large overriding ideological points of view that say this is right, this is wrong, as Janet Holt thought that the Poussin was right and Rembrandt was wrong.
I'm sorry, but I must speak here, if I understand, as kind of representative and even top agent of French cultural imperialism in Holland, which is a difficult situation. But I try to give you the keys of our reflections, because we have less and less, as Steve just pointed, we have less and less certainties, of course, in France, and I think also here, about what is a diplomatie culturelle, a cultural diplomacy. In fact, in these two words, we can perceive three crises. The crisis of a diplomacy itself, which is linked to states, and states are minor and minor agents in nowadays world. I don't have to develop internet, European community, and so on. Globalization. The concept of culture is also in crisis, and I totally agree with Steve. Sometimes you have to limit this concept, because now it's something which begins with Mondrian and ends up with Big Brother. So maybe you're right. In fact, this concept is, and every day we have this problem. I see Odile Chenard from the European Cultural Foundation. What is precisely the cultural object of what we do? Then there is, third crisis, the crisis of the legitimacy of the idea itself of a national culture. And there, I start again about Rembrandt, about Van Gogh, about all these people who were supposed to be typically Dutch, French, English, and the art historians, at least the historians, are much more and more skeptical about the idea of a national culture. I take the idea of Benedict Anderson. Benedict Anderson said, there is nothing such as a national culture. There is an imagined community which is made, forged by a certain number of powers. You become French, you become Dutch. This is nothing really in your blood, in your genes. So all that, of course, makes our work difficult, especially when you are French. Why? Because France has a strong tradition of state intervention, and this is precisely a problem nowadays, state intervention. Second, France has a very strong idea of itself as a cultural nation. France defines itself as a country of language and history, two cultural definitions. Holland defines itself as a country of trade and religion. That's different. So we are a country which has a very strong, some people find it a bit too strong, idea of itself as a cultural nation, but you must not forget that at a certain time France had a cultural influence, and I think it's still true, as a cultural influence which is much bigger than its real power, its real size, population, economy. So this international side is of course much less than it used to be. Just take the case of the Netherlands. If you take the Netherlands, 30 years ago, I call it the generation before the Mammoet, the pre-Mammoet. These people used to speak French. When you were at a certain level in society, you spoke French. Nowadays, and that's the big difference, you can be a big journalist, a big banker, a big cultural man, even a big historian of art, without speaking French. That's the difference in 30 years. So it seems that the idea of nations is not really over. Second, we see all nations giving more and more importance to their cultural policy. And a big example of it is the Netherlands. The Netherlands used to do not much for its own culture abroad. The translations from Dutch into foreign languages, that was next to nothing. The promotion of Dutch art abroad, that was just next to nothing. The last decennium, in contrary, I think the last years especially, the Dutch have made incredible efforts to promote their own culture. It's very sensitive. You can feel it very much, for example, in Paris, where really the Institut Néerlandais is doing much more now than a few years ago. So, you see why. You see that in fact many nations, and the case of the Netherlands is very clear, have the idea that their last fortress of identity is their own culture.